that was fighting for gay rights, and people were killed.
Nobody was killed at Stonewall.
Nobody was killed.
This is the moment Sasha Colby won season 15 of RuPaul's Drag Race, a climax of a career that was built for up to 2 decades. Given how much of a presence she's managed to insert into the fanbase of Drag Race, and effect she's currently having on pop culture as a whole, her life has so many different stages that I thought it was important to approach her story in a way that would do her justice, especially one that could withstand well into the future. So yes, the day has finally come for a deep dive about this queen. And I'll be honest, I was holding off on this for a while to make sure that I do a good job covering her trajectory. Before we go any further, I have a bet for you. And it's that honestly, I think Squarespace can build you a website faster than you can build furniture. This video is brought to you by Squarespace, the no-stress platform that helps you build a great-looking website without all the usual tech headaches. You get everything on one spot: your domain, beautiful design tools, built-in payments, analytics, and more. When I first tried it, I expected a learning curve, but it was actually super intuitive. I picked a template, dragged a few things around, and suddenly it looked like something I'd actually want to show people. No coding, no panicking, just vibes. And here's the feature I didn't realize I needed: the analytics dashboard. It shows you exactly where your traffic's coming from, what's working, what's not, all in real time. It's super helpful if you're selling something or just trying to grow your audience without guessing what people care about. So if there's something you've been thinking of launching, maybe a project, a store, or a portfolio, take this as your sign to finally do it. Click the link in the description below and head to Squarespace to start your free trial. And when you're ready to launch, you'll get 10% off your first purchase of a website or domain. Now, let's begin. The other day, I was thinking about Sasha Colby's rise to fame at an international level after the airing of RuPaul's Drag Race season 15. Granted, she was already a well-known queen within the drag community way before that, but to the average Drag Race fan, most had never heard her name until season 14, when Carrie Colby kept mentioning her legendary drag mother called Sasha Colby. With pretty much a good portion of the airing of season 14, fans discussed how much they'd like to see Sasha compete on the next season, especially since Carrie herself had won over people with her own personality. Yet, it got me thinking. Sasha's biggest claim to fame prior to getting on Drag Race was being a queen that had won the prestigious Miss Continental drag pageant in 2012, although she had already solidified herself as one of the biggest names of the pageant industry, especially within California. As for me, I had heard of Sasha Colby's name over the years. Funny enough though, I even stumbled upon her when I was doing my own deep dives into drag-related YouTube videos. When watching, for instance, Brooklyn Heights Miss Continental crowning in 2014, which then made me watch Naysha Lopez crowning in 2013, the same year that Sasha Colby herself was stepping down from the title. I remember even thinking, given that at the time Naysha and Brooklyn were the only Miss Continental winners to compete on Drag Race, if any of the other winners would be able to take the step into the franchise too. Brooklyn and Naysha were among the only cis gay men to win the title of Continental, something that usually tended to be only won by trans women. If this comes as a surprise, then you're not alone. Most viewers of the RuPaul's Drag Race franchise don't really know much about drag culture that exists outside of it. Like, you may understand that the pageant system in the United States holds a lot of value within the queens themselves, as well as being an extremely hard competition to be able to win. Yet, oftentimes, the intricacies or details behind the history of platforms like that of a highly regarded competition are often not understood at in-depth level. So as we dive into Sasha Colby's career, let's also take a peek inside at what the building blocks were for her in becoming your favorite drag queen. Sasha's legacy started in Waimanalo, Hawaii. It's a small beach town where the mountains are visible even from your own backyard, and the ocean is just across the street. Despite the beautiful environment, Sasha actually had a pretty tough time growing up, given that her family was super religious. Specifically, she was raised Jehovah's Witness. Jehovah's Witnesses are a slightly more stricter version of what people know as Christianity. They tend to reject things like medical blood transfusions, along with actively participating and shunning any family members or friends who break these rules, cutting them off right away. So it's no surprise that it isn't exactly known as an LGBT-friendly group of people. All that being said, while her family wasn't super strict about it, there was still a lot of shame that stemmed from queerness being viewed as something inherently negative. It's why, shortly after Sasha turned 14 years old, that she told her family she wasn't gonna go back to church. And surprisingly, they were okay with it. But even with that bit of freedom, she still didn't feel fully herself out in the world. Keep in mind, this is way before Sasha even realized she was a trans woman. So there was a lot of discovering she had yet to do. In fact, the first place where she started to find who she was actually in the bathroom of her home. Every day after school, she'd go straight there. Her sister kept makeup in the cabinet, so she'd grab some liner, throw on some mascara, light a candle, turn on the radio, and lip sync in the mirror. She did this for hours. It wasn't just a way to escape from reality, but also a foreshadowing of the entertainer she'd go on to evolve into. Sometimes she'd even use her sister's bras or throw on some sheer lingerie. Essentially, from the jump, she was a hoe. The next big step came on Halloween. Sasha was 17 years old now, and a bunch of her friends had rented a hotel in Waikiki. Her best friend Lindsay, who's still her best friend today, let her go full drag for the first time. They walked the streets together, and Sasha had this moment of complete clarity, where she told herself that she was a girl. That was it. No big speech, no formal coming out, just I'm gonna be a girl. And she never looked back. It was like an epiphany where everything finally made sense. The realization lined up with her stepping into the drag world too. In Hawaii, it's really common for drag shows to be filled with trans women, and that's what Sasha was surrounded by. Her drag mom, Sasha Colby, was everything. Showed Sasha that you could be trans and still have a beautiful life, a career, and a chosen family. Sasha also has trans aunties who showed her what a real, stable, thriving trans woman looked like. It was all completely flipping the script on what the media was telling about trans people at the time. Essentially, pretty quickly, Sasha got under the wing of her drag mother Cassandra and was able to start to build a community of people that she could relate to at a much deeper level than anyone else. By the time Sasha was 21 years old, for timeline purposes, this would have been around the year 2006, she had already won smaller drag pageants like Miss Hawaii Continental, going on to compete in the National Miss Continental, placing 5th, which was a really big deal, especially for someone who at that point was sort of new to the game. What the pageant system did was help Sasha strengthen her drag and elevate it to a much professional level. Along with that, it was a way for her to learn more about branding herself, which would prove to be useful in the coming years. Pageantry teaches queens how to present themselves, what their strengths are, and to focus on the aspects of their drag that are weak and in need of refining. Although, most importantly, what made the journey so much easier was the thrill to be in front of the audience, because at her core, Sasha was an entertainer that lived for the applause. Eventually though, she realized Hawaii could only take her so far. That's when she started visiting Los Angeles in the early 2010s, just feeling out the scene. Unfortunately, she did struggle for a while before being able to find her footing. There just wasn't a lot of trans drag performers getting booked in West Hollywood back then. So to make money and get noticed, she started go-go dancing. And not just anywhere. She became the first trans go-go dancer at the Abbey, which was kind of a big deal. That's actually how she started building momentum. Queens like Ray, Delta Work, and Morgan McMichaels were among the queens who started giving her her first gigs in WeHo, supporting her and uplifting her, something that to this day she's never forgotten. So then, where does Miss Continental fit into all this, and what's the history behind it? When it comes to Miss Continental, it was actually somewhat of a challenge for Sasha to be able to rise to her victory. What's so fascinating is how this pageant, often viewed as one of the most prestigious in the drag community, became a defining chapter in her career because it solidified what her purpose was in the world. Let's flash back to the year 2005. Sasha entered Miss Continental for the very first time at the age of about 20. Now, she wasn't your typical pageant queen. Back then, she was sort of a more alternative, artsy type, and not the classic glamour that she gives us now. This made her stand out right from the start, because Miss Continental has long been known for its polished glamour. But Sasha was bringing something different to the table that caught people's attention immediately. Despite being a newcomer and someone that didn't fit the usual mold, she blew everyone away and placed 5th. It would end up earning her an automatic invite for 2006. Basically, even in the early stages, it was clear that she had the talent and charisma to compete at a high level. However, 2006, her second time competing at Miss Continental, didn't exactly go as planned. Sasha ended up placing 12 that year, which was definitely a step back from the previous season. While it might look like a setback on paper, this year was actually full of important lessons and moments that helped her grow. Yet there was a major highlight. She actually won the talent category that night. She originally performed a jazz number that really showed off her showgirl vibe, which are staple in the pageant scene and beloved by audiences. But at the last minute, she switched things up to an unconventional act about a child nurse playing with dolls. It was super risky, and unfortunately, it wasn't well received at all. Sasha calls it one of the moments in her career that she had absolute crickets from the audience. This super vulnerable moment actually revealed her willingness to experiment and take creative risks. Still, that performance caught the attention of someone very important, proving that sometimes even the missteps end up being blessings in the long run. That someone was the owner of Miss Continental, who also ran the Baton Show Lounge in Chicago, a legendary drag cabaret. The Baton has been a cornerstone of drag performance for decades, especially for trans and gender nonconforming performers. Plus, getting a job there was a huge opportunity. Sasha would end up being offered a job there, and that gig turned out to be her sort of drag university. Performing 3 shows a night, 5 nights a week, she was surrounded by trans showgirls and continental legends, soaking up experience and learning the ropes from the best. It was a grueling schedule, but it pushed her to develop an incredible stamina, quick costume changes, and a polished stage presence. It was intense, but it was kind of like the grind that shaped her into the polished performer she is today, providing her with not just the technical skills, but also a community base that helped her feel more grounded. Fast forward to 2009. Sasha came back to Miss Continental again, this time placing as the first runner-up. She was so close to the crown, and that near win only fueled her determination. Being a runner-up in such a prestigious pageant is still an achievement, but you can only imagine what it's like to be so close yet so far from the title. What this journey showed was that she consistently placed among the very best, and that her evolution as a performer was on a steady upward trajectory. That's when in 2012, on her 4th and final try, Sasha won Miss Continental, finally cementing her place among pageant royalty. This win wasn't just a personal victory, it was a culmination of years of hard work, growth, and persistence that carried with it the respect of an entire community. Winning Miss Continental is like reaching the summit of one of drag's toughest mountains. I mean, this was, in a way, the platform to push yourself into the limelight before RuPaul's Drag Race became what it is now. Looking at the bigger picture though, it's shortly after this that Sasha began to fully live on her own. She was paying rent, managing bills, and living full-time off drag. Something that she says was almost unheard of back in her early days of Hawaii, where most queens were working purely for tips. This shift into being financially independent was a huge milestone in her life and career, proving that drag could be a sustainable livelihood and not just a hobby. Having a steady paycheck from performing was revolutionary to her, and she was only about 22 or 23 when she started building this new independent life. In fact, what really stands out about Sasha is how winning Miss Continental wasn't just a finish line for her. When she talks about that win, she makes it clear it didn't mean that she could just stop there. Winning the crown took her to Los Angeles and opened the door to pursue bigger dreams. That being said, even with all that support, it was still difficult to continue building on top of everything she had achieved. In 2014, Sasha made the move to Los Angeles official. That's when she really started thinking about Drag Race. But here's the thing. For over a decade into the franchise, Sasha never actually submitted an audition tape. Not once. It wasn't because she didn't want to do it. Instead, it was because she was waiting for the right time. A time when the show and the fandom would be ready to embrace all of her. She didn't want her win to feel like a token moment. She wanted to earn it. That's why when she finally walked into the workroom years later, she was beyond ready. What I mean by this, or at least what I gather from the interviews I've read, it seems that, as you know, the evolution of trans queens on the series had a very tumultuous run, with the original season strongly emphasizing the binary between queens out of drag and their drag persona, to the debate on whether fully transitioned women should be allowed to compete on the show. It's why, for instance, the casting of Gia Gunn on All Stars 4 in 2019 was one of the ways of production showing the audience that they were open to the idea. Yet it would take a couple more years before having trans queens in the competition was no longer something new, since nowadays nobody thinks twice when a queen walks in looking like a woman. It's just like, yeah, there's yet another contestant on the season. That's why after Carrie Colby got on season 14 and almost half the cast came out as trans, what better moment than for Sasha to finally throw her hat in the ringer? That being said, as mentioned earlier in this video, I wanted to take a moment to cover Miss Continental's significance and how it turned into a pillar within the drag world. The Miss Continental pageantry system started almost 50 years ago. The first competition took place in the year 1980 and only had 14 contestants. Most drag pageants at the time excluded trans queens from competing in. So a big component behind the creation of Miss Continental was that unlike other pageants, this one welcomed transgender female impersonators, a place where they didn't need to deal with the exclusion they had been experiencing in all other spaces that existed. Miss Continental was like the answer to all their problems. It created a space where trans and non-cis queens could compete, be celebrated, and actually win. So in a lot of ways, it wasn't just a pageant. It was a form of protest, with an aim to revolutionize the perspective on the art form of drag. The person behind the birth of Miss Continental was a man by the name of Jim Flint. Jim Flint is basically a legend in the world of drag and queer nightlife. Even before Continental, he owned a venue called the Baton Show Lounge in Chicago, which opened way back in 1969. That place became a major hub for drag, and especially for trans women in entertainment, which was a pretty bold move at the time. He sort of saw how as the LGBT community started building their spaces throughout gay bars, the trans individuals seemed to be the odd ones out most of the time. When it came to drag, cis queens felt that since trans women often had body modifications or were on hormones, that it was unfair for them to compete in the same competition. So they had to work twice as hard, not really getting the payoff for their hard work, at least in most cases. That's why Jim Flint started to put in a focus in trying to cultivate this part of our community that truly needed support. As I said before, the very first Miss Continental pageant only had 14 contestants, but flash forward just 10 years and by 1990 the competition had exploded. There were now 44 contestants in the main Continental pageant, with 25 official preliminaries across the US. That growth didn't just happen by accident. It happened because the pageant was fulfilling a need that so many other systems ignored. It gave performers, especially trans women, a place to be seen, fully on their terms. Then in 1991, the pageant evolved again with the introduction of Miss Continental Plus, a division specifically created for plus-size entertainers who weighed 225 pounds or more. Now, obviously, drag has never really been specific to one body type, but this move was still pretty revolutionary. It meant that the system was expanding what they considered to be the standard of beauty. It provided plus-size performers to have a platform where they could get their name known. Queens like Roxy Andrews would go on to win Miss Continental Plus in the future. If you're paying attention and you haven't zoned out watching this video, then you'll sort of start to see how Continental kind of followed the evolution that RuPaul's Drag Race would have. Drag Race was always about inclusivity and representation, but it wasn't always perfect from the beginning and took a while before it reached the standard that properly included everyone. Fast forward to the year 2003 and Mr. Continental was launched, a category for male entertainers. Then just 1 year after that, in 2004, they added Miss Continental Elite, created specifically for queens over 40. That's right, a space just for seasoned queens, for the ones who've been doing drag longer than some of their competitors had been alive. It was another important acknowledgement of just how many subgroups were when it came to drag itself. Historically, all of these different divisions, Miss Continental, Miss Continental Plus, Miss Continental Elite, and Mr. Continental, were held during Easter weekend in Chicago. But eventually, everything moved over to Labor Day weekend, which is now considered the traditional Continental season. In fact, the only time that they didn't do Miss Continental since it started in 1980 was the year 2020 due to the pandemic lockdowns. Speaking of which, in 2020, the documentary The Queens was released that went into more detail around the impact of Miss Continental. The film focused on the journey of 4 queens, Tiffany, Gabby, Sunny, and Naisha, as they prepared to compete in the pageant. It was actually pretty emotional and showed just how high the stakes are for those that decide to compete in it. Just like Drag Race, there's a lot of time, money, and effort that's spent into even having a chance at doing well to impress the judges, while also showcasing the internal politics that happens among the queens. Yet what surprised me the most was how at times it was sort of disturbing the lengths that some of these people were going through. It talks about all the physical changes that many of the contestants made. Things like silicone injections, implants, hormone therapy, in some cases not even from proper medical medical procedures. It comes into fruition with these things affecting the life outside of the pageant, where in the real world, a lot of these queens dealt with so much isolation, struggling to find someone to date, family rejecting them, and that's why, for a lot of them, it created more of a need for them to win the crown and earn the glory and approval that they couldn't get from anywhere else in their life. For most of them, this would be proof that they truly did matter. What makes Continental so special is how seriously everyone takes it. Queens travel from across the country to invest thousands of dollars, spend months preparing, only to not even place. It's sort of like queens who get on Drag Race but end up going home first, after buying all of their runway out, and even practicing for challenges like Snatch Game. What they thought would be their big break ends up being one of the hardest humiliations of their life, even if, in the long run, it ends up being an achievement in their career to have even been able to participate. This heartbreak is a risk that every single queen has to put on the line when they enter their name into the contest. Now, while there's been almost 50 different queens who have won the crown of Miss Continental, some that I wanted to highlight includes Chili Pepper, who won the very first Miss Continental in the year 1980. She was a legend for decades, but sadly passed away recently in September 2024. The next is Tandy Andrews, who won Miss Continental in 1986. She went on to be the founder of House of Andrews. Yes, this is the grandmother of Roxy Andrews, but we'll get to that in just a second. Tandy Andrews sadly passed away in the year 1995, but was able to mentor queens like Erica Andrews, the drag mother of Roxy Andrews. Erica Andrews would end up winning Miss Continental in 2004, with Roxy Andrews later winning Miss Continental Plus in 2010. Sadly, while Erica Andrews was able to see Roxy be crowned and carry on her legacy, she would end up passing away in March of 2013, shortly after season 5 had started airing, and just 3 months before the finale of the season where Roxy would make the top 3. Then of course we have Sasha Colby, the 2012 winner, followed directly by Naysha Lopez, the 2013 winner, and Brooklyn Heights, the 2014 winner. There's even Vanessa Van Cartier, who won in 2019 and went on to also win Drag Race Holland season 2. As of right now, the only winners of the main Miss Continental legacy to have passed away include Chili Pepper, the winner of the first Miss Continental in 1980, Shireen Alexander, the winner of 1984, Tandy Andrews, the winner of 1986, Amber Richards, the winner of 1991, Lady Kateria, the winner of 1995, and Erica Andrews, the winner of 2004. While to most of you watching, these are just random names of queens you don't know much about, it sort of makes you wonder just how much of an impact they had in each of their legacies, given that they went on to have a direct impact on queens that grew up around them. And oftentimes, some of the biggest pageant queens that we know from Drag Race have ties to these individuals that expand decades into the past. Sasha Colby only auditioned for RuPaul's Drag Race once. For a while, even before season 14's introduction of Carrie Colby, there was a lot of people around Sasha urging her to audition. Gottmik was one of the first, telling her you have to audition. At first, she would sort of just brush it off, but ultimately, it was after Kylie Sonique Love won All-Star 6 that it really ignited something within her to have that also be a goal that she wanted to achieve too. After 22 years of being a drag performer, her season 15 audition was her first time actually trying, and naturally, she was cast immediately. When she originally got the call, her first thought was how shockingly easy it was to get on, but it made sense given that the attention on her had skyrocketed once Carrie Colby became known in the fanbase. As a contestant, she offered more to the table than she realized. She was a fully seasoned drag queen that was doing her thing, way before RuPaul's Drag Race came into the game, and earned respect from some of the biggest names in the community. This comes at a time where most of the new queens that get on the series started drag because of the show, oftentimes not having a lot of versatility to them because really, they are still sort of baby queens even if some of them have polished drag. The X factor and overall rawness that we got to see from Sasha throughout the competition proves this. Casting her sort of came at the perfect time too. While it's still an issue currently, 2023 was when we really saw the dangers of the super rapidly growing drag and anti-trans bills circulating in the US. Started as a personal goal, quickly shifted into something bigger. To her, many scared queer people needed a mother, and she was ready to feed us some milk. Obviously, the Colbys are a famous name in the pageant world, and Sasha's Miss Continental win was a big deal long before the show. But unlike Unlike queens like Naysha Lopez or even Brooklyn Heights, whose continental titles got mentioned and then mostly sidelined by the edit or the cast, Sasha's win actually commanded respect in the workroom. You could tell that the other queens were straight up shook to be in her presence, and knew that off the bat, she was the most likely to make it to the finals. It felt like the only time where the Drag Race fandom and the cast alike truly treated a legendary pageant queen as a legend. It gave the aura that we were truly about to witness something historic. Off the bat, she became the first native Hawaiian queen to compete on the show, reflecting it in her entrance look, comprised of tribal tattoos, cultural symbols, and the Hawaiian Islands inked on her thighs. She sees tattoos as a reflection of transition, which resonated deeply as a trans woman. Despite all this, Sasha had a lot to prove. When season 15 starts, it became clear from an audience perspective that she was a legend, but succeeding at the actual challenges is a whole nother story, especially in the modern era of the series. When the episode started airing, her talent show was the first performance we get to see. It wasn't necessarily the gaggiest thing. In fact, many thought it was just a safe presentation, yet you could argue that what she was really doing was saving her tricks for the weeks that followed. On episode 3, this is when Sasha earns her first challenge win, clarifying for viewers that if you were still debating, she indeed was one of the main contenders for getting the crown. We were also able to see how she would translate her drag for RuPaul's Drag Race. She could have ended up sticking to a very specific aesthetic. Instead, she consistently would go on to show many different presentations that exuded different vibes each time, with the correlation between them all being the polish that was always present. Once we got to the Snatch game and she played Anne Crouch, managing to do a decent job, what was happening wasn't just her succeeding in the challenges, it was the fact that she was allowing us to see that this legendary queen who was really talented also had this really fun personality that was all behind it. She just seemed so down to earth. At no point was she flaunting about her achievements in her drag career as a method of demeaning the other queens in the room, which even if she had done that, it still would have been completely valid. Yet it was quite a surprise for her especially to be able to not just exceed at the comedy acting challenges, but subsequently do well at the Snatch game, which is the hardest improv challenge you can get. The next challenge was a sewing/design one called House of Fashion, where she goes on to be in a group with Lucy, Marsha, and Malaysia. While she didn't win this episode, you could already see how consistently she was placing among the top for each of the episodes. On the verse challenge, the queens had to pretend to be old people and write a verse about it. This whole challenge in itself always felt like a bit of a mess to me, because it just seemed weird to sort of take the piss out of old people. But maybe that's just me being picky. Regardless, Sasha's lyrics for her verse were cute, yet it was the physical comedy that she gave that added an X factor, making her stand out the most from her group. It was at this point that I and many viewers realized it felt like she was just good at everything. Mind you, we hadn't even gotten to see her lip sync for her life on the main stage yet, but we'll get to that in just a second. When we finally get to see Sasha Colby get paired up with Anitra, it was the perfect setup. Anitra had already shown us that she was a super stunty queen. I mean, she literally came off the bat telling us that she could duck walk. So now it was like, would Sasha Colby be able to outperform Anitra, who at this point in the viewer's eyes was the best lip syncer of the season so far? But like, look at these moves. This was a queen that was doing moves that not a lot of other queens are able to do, but she managed to make it look so flawless and easy. To me, it was clear right then and there that if Sasha made it to the finale, it doesn't matter who else is there with her, because she will be the one to win. The only other option for her to lose would have been if she really messed up one week and we got a shocking elimination where she was sent home. For the next 2 episodes, Sasha goes on to win 2 maxi challenges, the episode 9 sewing/design challenge, and then the challenge where they had to interview the celebrity guest, putting Sasha at a total of 3 challenge wins. Plus, everyone was obsessed with their journey. The Blame It on the Edit episode was the last competitive one, where Sasha earns another win, leaving her at a total of 4 challenge wins, the most out of all 4 queens heading into the finale. By the time we get to the reunion, it felt more like a filler one, since there wasn't a lot of drama in it. This reunion was kind of just there. This would also go down as the last main season to do an episode specifically for the reunion, since season 16 and season 17 replaced it with the lip sync Lollapalooza. By the time the finale rolled around, expectations were sky high. Her final look, a stripped down nearly nude out with delicate floral appliques, caught some criticism for being minimal. But to her, this wasn't just about dressing for the finale. When she was heading onto that stage, she wasn't nervous, she was angry. Angry with the anti-trans and anti-drag hating campaigns that were ramping up. She saw the moment as a chance to say, "I dare you to look away," to the general public. The giant coat that she wore for her final number couldn't even fit through a regular doorway. It filled up a whole car, and when she opened it up and pulled out a single rose, it felt iconic. The rose pull was a direct nod to burlesque legend Modesty Blade, an old school move that now had a new meaning attached to it. Some wondered if season 15 was too late in Sasha's career for her to really thrive. But what actually happened was the opposite. The show caught her at her peak, not because her earlier career lacked excellence, but because this was the first time that it was being captured at this level of scale. For example, other legends like Tamisha Iman had suffered from bad timing. Tamisha's drag heyday was in the 90s and 2000s. By the time she made it onto the show, she wasn't physically able to deliver what had once made her famous. But with Sasha, everything aligned. Her age, her talent, her platform, it all hit at the right time. After the win, Sasha made it clear that she wasn't interested in just being the moment. She was planning for longevity. That's where her focus has been. Touring, building her brand, and leaving something lasting behind. Because Sasha Colby isn't just another Drag Race winner. She's now a blueprint. A queen who didn't wait to be discovered, but arrived fully formed, fully intentional, and fully aware of the power of drag when it's done with soul. After Drag Race, Sasha went all out. She launched her first one-woman show called Strip, a stripped-down narrative-driven piece that mixed storytelling, dance, and minimalism. It pulled a lot of her roots in childhood dance and gave her space to be vulnerable without a ton of spectacle. Then in 2024, she came back with Strip 2, this time even more personal. The show was built with her original creative team, people she's been working with since growing up in Hawaii. So the chemistry on stage was able to be baked into what they planned for their 36-city tour, which was a big step up from the 22-city run that they did the year before. To pull that off, she had to stop using planes to travel and decided to switch to a bus tour, which was more sustainable, less exhausting, and easier for her body. On top of that, she did a drag competition element. Every stop on the tour featured a local drag opener, selected from over 600 submissions. Fans voted online and each city had its own winner. This was actually a really cool thing to do and definitely helped a lot of local queens be able to have more exposure to newer audiences. As for where she's at mentally, Sasha's been super transparent about how much mental health work she's been doing the past few years. She's not just planning for her next gig, she's thinking 10-20 years down the road. She wants to end up being a queer elder, someone who's still sharp and lives in the community when she's 60. While talking about her legacy, Sasha's mentioned that she's 100% open to hosting Drag Race or something else, and she already sees herself as someone helping shape the future of drag. She pointed out that RuPaul used to be way more hands-on in the early seasons and suggested that it might be time to bring back that sort of energy. But do you guys think you'd enjoy seeing Sasha as the potential candidate to carry the hosting of RuPaul's Drag Race once RuPaul steps down? Let me know in the comments. So now, it wouldn't make sense to do a deep dive on Sasha Colby and not mention Chappell Roan. It all started when in early 2024, Chappelle, who was about to explode in mainstream media, said the line, "I'm your favorite artist," while in the middle of performing at a concert. This was a clear direct reference to Sasha Colby, who had come up with the line while doing her Meet the Queens for season 15, where she said that she's your favorite drag queen's favorite drag queen. Funny enough, Sasha didn't even know who Chappelle was at first. Her team had apparently been playing some of her older stuff around her, and Sasha hadn't even clocked it. Then one day, she was watching The Tonight Show with Jimmy Fallon, and Fallon credited her, and she ended up getting name dropped on the show. And that's when Sasha was like, wait, who is this? That would kick off a chain of events that ended up with them actually meeting in person. Their first real interaction happened at Seattle's Capitol Hill block party in July 2024, where Sasha came on stage and joined Chappell during a performance of Hot to Go, which was already becoming somewhat of a queer anthem. Sasha dubbed her a Colby, officially making her an honorary drag dog. Sasha later introduced Chappell as My Daughter again at the 2024 MTV VMAs while presenting her, which really solidified solidified their bond. One thing Sasha has really emphasized is how drag is always influencing pop culture, even if people don't want to admit it. She said it best, drag queens are the tastemaker. Goddesses see goddesses, which is sort of true. The line between drag and pop stardom has always been thinner than people think, and Chapel is proof of that. So then, when I first started thinking about all this, how Sasha went from a legendary drag pageant royalty to becoming the international favorite of season 15, I realized something. Her fame didn't just explode overnight. It had been years in the making. The seed was planted back when Sasha Colby was dropping her name on season 14, sparking that underground hype train among fans who were waiting to get to know who this person was. And those that already knew who she was were completely aware that once she set foot on that set, she was going to become an instant frontrunner. What followed was a perfect set of events, one after the other. A superstar with a long-established legacy stepped into the franchise with an audience that finally was going to catch up to her. All of those Miss Continental crowns, the performances in Hawaii, Chicago, and Los Angeles, they weren't just trophies. They were like preparation courses that allowed her to have such an easy time at succeeding every week on the show. By the time she entered season 15, she literally was cementing herself into the history of pop culture. If you enjoyed this video, please give it a like and comment below, because I actually put a lot of effort into this one, and honestly, I might start focusing in on giving you guys what you love the most, which is these super big deep dives on queens with clips and tidbits that most of the time people wouldn't even find if they didn't put hours of research worth into it. Thanks again to Squarespace for sponsoring today's video. Make sure to click the link in the description to try your free trial, and when you're ready to launch, you'll get 10% off your first purchase of a website or domain. I want to take a moment to thank my patrons. In the Elite Pink Squad, we have Matthew Burns, Gay Uncle, Sari Tish, Natasha DeLeon, Las Potitas, Cool Gal Nan, and Jetsam Adams. And in the Green Squad, we have Cayman Rider Furry, Edgar Allan Pup, The Only Sean, IJS, Not a Punch But a Keek, Jack Beck, Bashir with the Good Beard, Galeria Gomez, Sarah G, Boiled Peanut, Max Whale, Olivia Marr, Dea, Scarlet Rose, Niall O'Hearn, and Michael Alsante. If you'd like to see your name on the screen, you can support me on Patreon. The link will be in the description. Thank you so much for watching this video, and get ready for more.